Okay, right, thank you.
We're now live.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the Performance Scrutiny People's Committee. Before we move on to the agenda, I have to read out this declaration. The committee meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and the remote meetings protocol agreed by the council, which will operate alongside the council standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I will remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request, you turn off your cameras, mute your microphones when you're not speaking. The council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting, the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Okay, for the benefit of those people watching at home, 1, 2, 3, or whatever the number is, no, I'm not going to speak about that. As well as being recorded, as well as being broadcast live, the recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the council's website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Whilst translations of the proceedings can be provided upon request, the images, sounds, and recordings may be used for training purposes within the council. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 1, apologies for absence.
Apologies for today's meeting, Chair, Councillor Tom Suller and Councillor Jan Cleverly.
Okay, any other apologies? Declarations of interest? Okay, we'll go to the minutes of the previous meeting. We've got it there on page 3. Page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Are we able to move that as a true and accurate record?
Chair, Councillor Stephen Marshall is notified he wants to talk, please.
Okay, yes, Dusty.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question is just following up on the last page, just the point above section 6 about the forward work programme update. It was noting about the IT issues with partners, especially with the police, and hopefully soon it will be resolved. I'm wondering, because it's been a few months since our last meeting, are we any closer of knowing if that's been resolved or a timetable of when it will be? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move? That's yeah. Do we have anybody to move the minutes, please? Anybody moving the minutes? Can everybody hear me? Let's get sure. As I can't see anybody, as you know, I'm working off a blank screen here.
Yes, I'm happy to move that they're a true record.
Thank you. Seconder. Okay.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Trevor. Okay, matters arising. Well, can we? Is there any updates on what Councillor Marshall has just identified?
I'll chase up that information for the committee and send any updates as soon as I can.
Okay, will you send that to all committee members?
Sure thing, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other matters arising? Okay, we now move over to the Justice. No, I'm looking at the wrong page. Sorry. We now move over to the service plan end of year reviews. Who's presenting this morning?
For the first item, Chair, it would be Chris Humphrey, Head of Adult and Community Services.
Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Please accept my apologies. We have a bit of an IT issue here. I can't see anybody, so I'm unsighted this morning, as they say. So
Understood.
okay, so if you think things are running strange, then yeah, it's a difficult thing. But there we go. We're doing the best we can. Okay, would you like to take us through the
Yes.
report, please?
Of course. This is the end of year service review for 2020-21. So I think people will understand that it was rather an exceptional year for all of us in terms of delivering frontline social services. The objectives are kind of set out in the introduction. I'll just comment on the budget and end of year outturn, and then kind of give an update around some of the key points. We ended the year in a significant underspend. That was mainly driven by the two elements really for awareness. A reduction in the overall number of people that we were supporting both in residential care and in the community with care and support plans. Some of that, I'm sure members would understand, was driven as a direct result of COVID, because similar to all parts of Wales, we experienced, unfortunately, quite a significant number of COVID-related deaths in Newport, particularly in the very early stages of the pandemic, when people will remember we were very severely impacted very early on. The other element of the underspend position is that we have had significant contributions from Welsh Government in terms of sustaining social services through the pandemic, in the form of fee uplifts for domiciliary care services, and also for residential placements. And that was aimed at sustaining those services through the pandemic and making sure that they had enough resources to provide some of the kind of additional capacity they need. For example, helping people to self-isolate in their rooms in residential care when they were admitted from hospital. So those are the two main factors which have led to our underspend in that financial year. It's just to highlight the service risks. The overall stability of social care providers we've indicated as a risk, because we are yet working with colleagues regionally and with Welsh Government to estimate the impact on social care coming out of the end of this pandemic, and whether all of the services are going to be able to sustain themselves once that financial cushion, if you like, is no longer in place. And also there's also a big challenge, as has been on the news this morning, around the sustainability of the workforce in health and social care. The pressure on adult and community services is also highlighted as a risk. And although I think the overall report suggests a very positive position in terms of how we've coped and how we've got through this, that we are experiencing unprecedented demand on our services now coming out of the pandemic. And I think the numbers of people presenting what we describe as a front door to social services has almost doubled to what we would experience in previous years. And I think people have been struggling and are now kind of coming to us because they can't cope any longer. The liberty protection safeguards risk is linked to a change in legislation which was due to be implemented this year, but has been postponed to April 2022. And that changes the kind of the legal framework that we have to put in place for people who don't have mental capacity, whether that's because of dementia or some other mental health problems, such as a severe learning disability. We have to put those legal protections in place to make sure those people's rights are protected. So, for example, particularly in a care home setting, or even if they live in their own home, and they're not able to make decisions for themselves due to mental capacity, then we have to put a legal framework in place to support them. And then there's kind of an ongoing pressure around, obviously, safeguarding, which I think you were referencing earlier. So those are the main risks that we've highlighted. I think in terms of the kind of the overall picture, as we said, it's been an unprecedented year. We've the journey has, going back to the very beginning, where we didn't have all of the kind of the safeguards available to us, such as PPE and later vaccines, and how we've coped and supported people through that pandemic has been very significant. And I think that we've worked extremely hard, and our internal homes have been supporting their residents to keep them safe. And also we've worked extremely hard with colleagues in the care homes across Newport to make sure that people are kept safe, and that we continue to do that. Really, in our world, nothing, no restrictions of ease, but really not a lot has changed in terms of the kind of the measures and support that we have to maintain. For example, making sure that staff have access to adequate PPE. So we've in the middle of the pandemic, we had to support an Iron Bevan Health Board to open a brand new hospital, which was, would have been a challenge at the best of times. But opening that new hospital in the middle of a pandemic was a considerable challenge, because it meant that all of those what we call discharge pathways had to be changed. And the way the Grange operates, it means that that is now the kind of the new accident and emergency facility for our part of Gwent. So that had to switch over from the Royal Gwent. So it meant that we had to sort of put quite a lot of resource into accident and emergency and into those assessment units in the new Grange Hospital to make sure that people could be discharged and supported to leave hospital in the most timely way that we could. We've also managed to still continue with our aim to open additional facilities in the community for people who are particularly coming through transition. So people who need to be able to live independently in the community. So some of those schemes have been delayed, but we're glad to say that a lot of them are now back on track and are kind of opening up shortly. So there's been a significant amount of work. We are experiencing significant levels of demand currently. I also should highlight the work we're continuing to do to support people who were previously homeless, to make sure that people, those most vulnerable people, are working with GDAS and other organisations and the voluntary sector to make sure that people are kept as safe as possible. So I think those are kind of the main things I wanted to highlight, Chair. I don't know if there's anything that the Cabinet member wanted to add to those comments, and if the colleagues have got any questions on either those highlights or on the kind of the outcomes and on our performance against the outcomes as highlighted in the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, sorry. So, does the Cabinet member have anything to add, please?
Well,
Thank you. Good morning, Paul.
morning, Chair, and morning, committee. I think Chris has summed it up extremely well, actually, and I think if you look at the whole report, it's actually certainly becoming through COVID this year. I think it's an excellent review of the services that we've had to supply to everybody. I think what's one of the wonderful things, I think what happened in Newport is the way the officers really responded to the vaccinations. And I know one of the officers, and I'll mention his name, with Gareth Cook. He was going out Saturdays and Sundays, phoning every officer and different people in the council to come in for an injection on the vaccinations at the centre on a Saturday and Sunday afternoons. And I think it was recommended, certainly, that at the RPB board, that we ought to sort of mention him, because he was doing this not just for Newport, but for the whole of the 5 authorities, as well as the health board as well. So I think, you know, we really stepped up to the plate on that. But I think if you go through all the report, you know, I can't see one red part in that, because I think if you look at all of them, I think we've responded extremely well. And I think, and Chris was right to say, yes, we have been helped by the Welsh Government. So obviously when some of this funding finishes, it's going to be very difficult, and there's going to be some sort of hard sort of responses that we're going to have to look at, because certainly with care homes and domiciliary care, you know, we really did put a lot of extra funding for that, and that's going to be a worry going forward.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, everybody rose to the challenge, and I'm amazed at and I'm going to use the word heroes. Everybody that works for us and came to work and worked during the pandemic are our own local grown heroes, and I personally thank them all. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through the report. So on page 15 of the report, so if there's any questions, so we'll start with page 15, that's the front cover, page 16, page 17, page 18. I have a question on page 18, and it's under the executive summary from the head of service. It just that Newport offer respite in the absence of former day services. So we offer the respite in the absence of the former day service. What I'm interested in is, what does that look like in reality? And also, for example, if you go into the homes of people and people don't want you into the homes, what's the fallback position? And also, if you take people out to socialize them outside, what happens when it's raining? Without the obvious questions. So what about a fallback? Just so I can have a greater understanding of what's really behind that statement.
So in common with all other local authorities, we and organisations, our physical building-based day service closed because of the risks around obviously bringing those people together in one building. We have to remember this was pre-vaccinations, so we and we had to adhere to Public Health Wales and Welsh Government guidance in this area. So this is not within our gift to make different decisions to the guidance. So we had to close those day services. So what we did was establish what we described as an outreach service. So using the members of staff who would normally be supporting those people in our day service building, we're working with those people out in the community. So that was a combination of supporting those people in their own homes, and obviously adhering to all guidance around social distancing, and where you can't social distancing, wearing full PPE. So that's not just about wearing a face mask, that is actually wearing full PPE, as would be our domiciliary care staff. And where it's possible, and you say it's to some extent weather permitting, supporting those people to sort of access activities where it's allowed and where restrictions allow in the community. And that could be just going out for, taking someone out in a wheelchair for a walk through the park, or sort of going into, some last summer, for example, there were some easing of restrictions, weren't there? And some facilities like cafes and things were able to open, and then we went back down into further lockdown in September, in the autumn. So while we were able to do that, we would take people out into the community. So it's very much based on the kind of individual need and their individual preferences. So we've learned a lot from that work, and now a lot of people actually don't necessarily want to go back to a service that's operating from a building. They actually prefer a combination of doing things out in the community, and having some support in their own home, plus obviously attending a building, a service-based building as well. So it's much more of a kind of a varied arrangement now. Does that answer your question, Chair?
It sort of does, but that's okay for now. We've got a couple of questions coming up. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was mostly alongside, I think, what Chris mentioned in her introduction speech. It was mainly around basically the mental health, especially for staff at this time, and about burnout. And just wanted to hear from a Newport perspective what we have done as a local authority to combat that, and if there's anything that we've been doing as a regional level as well, that would be also nice to hear. Thank you.
Chris.
So there's been quite a lot of work that's happening both within the council, nationally and regionally, to support staff with their mental well-being. So there's been a lot of tools and support put in place to help people through that. Initially, when we first went into this scenario, we had quite a few staff who were quite understandably extremely anxious and may have had underlying health conditions themselves, who worried about their own well-being, their physical well-being, and also their mental health. So, but we've supported staff through this journey very effectively, and we're now in a position where all of our staff have been able to return to work in a way that supports their well-being. Some staff have chosen and been supported to be redeployed into other teams and other services. But also we have very few, if any, staff now who are have not been supported to return to work and supported with their well-being. So there's been an enormous amount of work that's happened, and funnily enough, I was talking to some of my managers and colleagues this week, and they're sort of, as we come out to a level of normality, they were commenting on how well staff felt they'd been supportive and how resilient we've managed to be.
Okay, are you happy with that, Steve? Councillor Marshall, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins, Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. A number of things. Chris, you mentioned about the underspend. How does that fare compared with other local authorities?
I think it's difficult to compare with other local authorities. I think most local authorities have are in a not dissimilar position to us, but I think there are one or two that I'm aware of who whose financial position is not as positive as ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing was in regards to, I'd like to thank members of the social service staff for all the hard work they've done over 2020 and 2021. It's been a tremendous pressure on that service. What concerns me now, Chris and Councillor Cochrane, is the knock-on effect from that into this financial year is going to be very, very difficult. And I'm wondering whether the service which you're providing is going to be able to accommodate that pressure with what you have.
I think we are not in a really difficult position, because quite honestly, we've got a good reputation as an employer and as a service area, and I'm sure Sally will comment later. When we go out to recruit, we do quite well, and we have very, very few, a handful of agency staff compared to some other local authorities who are propped up, if I can say it, and that by use of agency staff. We've hardly any. But what we are experiencing, and it's not just us, is when we go out to advert for, say, social workers or occupational therapists or approved mental health practitioners, it's like hen's teeth. There just aren't the staff out there. So I think, for the lesson for the future has got to be about making sure that we are supporting people to come and work in social services, because it is a challenging area to go and work in. And I think my worry is also that perhaps not so much in our service area, but sort of wider, I think there might be quite a lot of more experienced people who will sort of at some point sort of say, well, that's it, I've had enough now. And that's also a risk, isn't it? So I think it is about making sure that we are supporting as many people as possible to sort of seek out working in social services, whether that's, in domiciliary care or as a qualified social worker. I think that's got to be the message that we get out to young people and people who want a change of career as well.
So are we actively looking at training young people or new people coming into the authority in the social service sector?
What we're looking at is we've been doing some work, because we have not what we normally call traineeships for social workers and OTs, and we are looking at how we can expand the numbers by moving from a traineeship model to a sponsorship model and working with the Open University, because that means that we can be a bit more flexible in how we actually support people to become qualified and potentially support higher numbers. Therefore, I mean, it still puts pressure on us because we have to release people to obviously do their training, but we do mean that when they're on doing their practice placements, they're kind of back in the workforce. So we can, we benefit from it as well. I mean, we've always committed to training and supporting as many people as we can manage. As another example, in terms of qualifying as an approved mental health practitioner, each local authority is given one place per year, and the health board are given one place per year. For I think the last 3 or 4 years, we've used other local authorities' places because they haven't taken them up, and we've trained 3 people per year. Now, again, that's a big commitment, but it does mean that, we have a pipeline, if you like, of qualified people coming through. And it also means that we benefit from those skills and experience.
Okay. One final question, yes or no. Are we getting support from Welsh Government, Chris?
I think, yes. You said yes or no, so I'll say yes.
Okay. I don't want to hog the ground, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Forsey, please. Forsey.
Good morning. I wanted to ask you about the number of homeless people that we've got now that you mentioned just now. I think pre-pandemic we had about 26 or 28 who were street homeless, and it's now down to about 6. Is that right? And
Yeah.
obviously the 6 that we've got left on the streets are going to be the most difficult to rehouse or to put into some accommodation. Do you think there is just some people that we are never going to succeed with, despite whatever we try and offer?
I think the answer to that is yes, for a whole range of very complex reasons. There are a small number of people who are very difficult to support into accommodation for a whole range of reasons. But I think the important thing is that everyone will have been offered accommodation, but there are a small number of people, you know, who are unable or unwilling to take up that offer. So I think that will be an ongoing problem. I think the other big challenge for us is the people that we've supported into temporary accommodation is finding those people, you know, permanent arrangements, because there is still a shortage of long-term accommodation for people. So and that's something that we're working hard on with colleagues in housing, and we'll continue to work on. But that is, and we're not alone in that. In Newport, I think that's a much wider challenge for all of us.
I mean, in many ways, it's a very good success story to the amount of work and the the amount that has been achieved to get quite a lot of people into accommodation. So in many ways that's a good thing. I just wondered if I might ask a different question now about clients and whether how you assess really whether they're happy with the level of support that they get, whether they're happy with the times that people come for care visits, and sort of connected with that is sometimes people coming to care can change at short notice, and from a familiar person coming to look after you to somebody who's had to sort of perhaps pick up the reins at short notice, and of course that's not so good for the clients to have somebody that I understand that sometimes it's unavoidable, but sometimes they've got somebody coming in who doesn't know them, doesn't know their needs. So how do we check that that the carers have the skills that they need, and whether the clients are happy with what they're receiving, the care they're receiving?
Well, there's two elements to this. The first is that as a social services, because we commission the care, then we would be checking with the care provider that they have all the kind of the skills and the staffing requirements in place. Then we do an individual review of everyone's care and support plans on an annual basis, and of course, but if their needs change, then they can come to us at any time and say, I need more or less care. Usually, often it's more. So at any time, they or their family can come to us and say, I need more support because my mobility is not as good as it was, whatever it may be. So we would do a review at that point to see what needs to change. And if necessary, we would change it straight away, if it was an urgent situation. And then obviously for the domiciliary care providers themselves and residential care, they would be inspected by Care Inspectorate Wales to make sure that they are fulfilling all of their regulatory requirements in terms of training staff and you know, the quality of the service that they are delivering. In terms of timings, it's often a bit of a logistical challenge for domiciliary care, because you have to have you know, everyone gets out of bed at more or less the same sort of time. So, you know, to have a workforce that can be, you know, in that kind of intensive 2-hour period in the morning, say, when everybody's wanting to get out of bed, and the support in place to do that is an enormous logistical challenge. But what they would normally do is sort of say, if it's a new care package, for example, say, well, we can start off coming at, I know your preferred time is, say, 9 o'clock, but at the moment we can only get to you at 8 o'clock. But as soon as an opportunity arises, we will shift and move towards your preferred time, but it may take us a few weeks. And I think that's an important message for residents to understand, is that, you know, it is a challenge, but if they say my preferred time is this, then they will do their best to get as close to that as they possibly can.
Yes, thank you. That was really the point that somebody was making, that can they change the times, you know, to suit them.
Yeah. I think it's often something they have to work towards. You know, if they say this isn't my preferred time, and they say, well, we'll do our best to get as close to that as we possibly can.
And if people are, say, you know, their mental health is deteriorating, do you think we're able to increase the level of care fast enough, or is this a problem?
We often are able to react very quickly and increase the care if that's what's needed at the time. Obviously, in terms of mental health, there may be other factors. You know, they may need, for example, to talk to their GP or their consultants about changing medication. But if it is about, you know, needing more support, then we're usually able to respond. I think, unlike some other parts of Wales, our domiciliary care and also the support that we access via our the voluntary sector. And when I say voluntary sector, it's not necessarily free, it's actually commissioned as well, because they provide a lot of support that we fund. You know, we're in quite a good position in Newport. You know, we have got quite a lot of resources that we can turn to support people. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey. Okay, if we move through, if you stop me then, if you've got any questions on any of the pages. I've got page 20, it's also showing on page 5, so you'll just know where we are. So any observations, members, on page 20?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Marshall, please.
Please, that's okay, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Main question is basically on that first box about the first contact, and just what actually lies within the first contact, because I'm aware of, say, members of the community in the Gare ward sometimes have issues of, say, going to the GP or going to a GP local to them when it's a satellite kind of way of working. So just wanted to kind of hear what the situation is, and is it a logistical kind of, you know, issue still with trying to get the right support within there as part of the work, please.
Our first contact team is basically our the team that deals with new people who've been referred into adult social services. So although they would normally be a team based in the civic centre, they've been working virtually over the last 12 months. So those they would receive referrals from other people, from anybody really, the public, but also GPs and community nurses, etc. And then they would do what they would do, do an assessment and talk the person or the referring person through what their problems are, and respond accordingly. In terms of their interface, I know that people have been doing virtual assessments, but we've always done kind of telephone assessments as kind of the first way of actually determining what the issues are. And then if if it requires a physical visit, then we will go and do a physical visit. So that's how that system works.
That's great, Chris. Thank you. If the chair would allow me, I've got a point on page 21 as well. If the chair will allow me to
we're going to move there now, so please.
Thank you, Chair. The question, Chris, is mainly just where it says about the regional meetings and the steering group about the development of a regional approach for service users to access and use the direct payment service.
Yeah.
I just obviously Torvine is missing out the local authorities, and just want to know, you know, is there a particular reason why, or is it kind of, you know, a bit of a hit and miss what local authorities all connect with, and what is the situation of what local authorities mix in with?
I think it's a reflection of, you know, obviously there may be kind of local or preferences in terms of, you know, some services may want to move towards a more regional service, but potentially at a different pace. So certainly, I think the Newport, Caerphilly and Blaenau Gwent in particular are keen to explore this. Monmouthshire is saying, well, yes, we'd be interested, and Torvine is saying possibly not for us at the moment, but maybe at some point in the future. But that's often the case when we develop a regional service. I think some people are often starting from a different place and come on board at a later point. That's not unusual.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Marshall?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just come in on that, please? It's
Yes,
Paul.
please.
It's obviously I go to all the carers forums, and although sort of we have this discussion about direct payments, and there's some people love it, they think it's actually brilliant, but there are some people, when they're caring for someone, the pressures they've got in caring for someone, last thing they want to do is be in charge of direct payments and employing someone. That's why we got to start moving into this area, because it's a lot of work for an individual if they've got a lot of pressure caring for someone to be the responsible person of the national insurance. They got, you know, that was the issue before, and that's why we got to go into a regional area to support these people, because it's hard enough looking after someone with certainly with a physical or mental disability to be in charge of looking after the payments as well.
Thank you, Councillor Cockburn, for that. Page 22, 23.
Chair?
Yes, please, please, John.
I put my hand up. It's
a problem
question.
seeing it, really.
Sorry, it's a question, but it's an observation as well. Chris mentioned in a report the agency staff situation, and as opposed to in-house staff, and she mentioned that other authorities have been propped up by agency staff. I mean, I've always been consistent with my argument. In-house staff are the way forward for any of those services, and quite frankly, we wouldn't have got through the last 12 months if we'd have had a majority of those staff from agencies. Our in-house staff have stepped up to the plate. You won't get commitment and loyalty like we've had from agency staff, in my humble opinion. You get it from in-house staff. They've shown that, they've committed themselves. I'm amazed how in all service areas we've kept operational, kept the service for the public of Newport. And whereas I worried at the start of this pandemic, as every other elected member did, I'm very satisfied now that we've progressed through the last 12 months and we're at where we're at. And one thing I must say, and I said it yesterday at Scrutiny, when it comes to staff, we mustn't forget this commitment and loyalty and input into what has been a severe pandemic. And at some stage, they need to be rewarded. And the way to reward loyal employees, committed employees, is through their wage packet.
Thank you, John. I'm sure that you will not let us forget that, and it's a sentiment that I too support. Page 24.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mainly, it's just about commissioning again. It's one of my concerns to always look at because the risk factor behind it. Obviously, we're showing amber in the first part of it on part 1 about assessing the impact, and I know it says about long term that we don't quite know about that, but can the committee be rest assured that obviously everything has been done looking at that and any risk is mitigated completely? You know, I'm sure it is, but can the committee be assured of that? And but basically, is there any potential issues that is being noticed? So even though we might not know particular places or anything like that, is there any main like headings of issues that Chris can mention, please? Thank you.
Chris?
We've done a risk assessment of our care homes. I won't mention names, but members may be aware that we have recently had a care home, a small care home in Newport. The owners decided to close, but that was very much a business-driven decision because they want to relocate the services all onto one site because you know that brings economies of scale, and it's something that they have been considering for some time. We've risk assessed the other care homes in terms of their levels of occupancy and their kind of financial sustainability as far as, you know, the information we have available to us. And we are, you know, so we're doing that work. We don't think we have any that we're aware of in a difficult or precarious situation. Obviously, there may be things that we're not aware of because we don't own these homes. So there may be other factors that haven't been brought to our attention. So we're doing that work. In terms of our domiciliary care sector and obviously sectors across working with other providers, I think we seem to be in a healthy position in terms of both their ability to recruit and provide a service. So yeah, we're doing that work, working proactively with the sectors to sort of talk to them and see if they've got any concerns or if there are any risks. So that work is ongoing.
Thank you, Chris. Are you happy with that, Councillor Marshall?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've also got another question in relation to that page, if the Chair will allow me to note.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So again, it's just with the section 3 about the working with the Bevan Health Board.
Yeah.
Just about obviously these partnerships, and just want to know the strength of the partnerships as the officers where I sit on partnerships as well. Always keen to understand that where possible, but also just seeing, you know, what has the partnership done within that regard and the work being done with COVID, and has it improved? By the sound of it, it has, but if there's ways that the officer can verbally report to us, that would be great. Thank you.
I think this has been an area of considerable strength through the pandemic because we have been meeting at least 3 times a week to monitor the kind of care sector. We've kind of got we share information on a daily basis in terms of which care settings and care services have been most impacted, and the support that's gone in from environmental health colleagues, from infection control colleagues, and the commissioning and contracts team has been very significant, and that partnership has gone from strength to strength. So that's been one of the real positives, I think, through this, is how we've worked together and all pulled together to support the care sector.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, page 25. Nothing. Anybody? 26, 27, 28, and 20.
Chair, if you don't mind, the 27, 28, sorry, it's me again, Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, please go.
Obviously, we're talking about carers. It's quite a big hot topic on the news and things like that there. Again, just want to hear from the officer, if possible, about the work that's been undertaken, if possible, especially in regards to respite care, because we know obviously that the respite has obviously been affected because of regulations, and obviously the mental health and the energy levels of people obviously providing that service. So just keen to hear about, you know, A, how it has been affected, but B, also looking at the future as we go into recovery to understand what's expected, please. Thank you.
So in terms of respite care, you're right, it has been a very big challenge because it's been very difficult to move people from home into a care home on a short stay basis and then go back home again. We've got arrangements in place about it sort of testing people to do that, and in fact the guidance has just been updated from Welsh Government, so we will again need to update our what we call our operating procedures around some of that as well, because if people now have been vaccinated, they don't necessarily always need to self-isolate, although I'm anticipating that some care homes, because of the impacts, will still want to play it safe on that, which I completely understand. So so that's in terms of kind of, if you like, overnight stays and respite. So most of our overnight stays and respite is now back up and running, although there are still restrictions and challenges around it because of the self-isolation periods. In terms of the day services, again, most of our day services that we commission are now back up and running, but restricted numbers because they can't take the numbers they would normally take. So if someone went previously, you know, on a daily basis, but only can go twice a week because of restricted numbers, then we would provide alternative support on those other days. But you're right, I think the strain on kind of family carers has been really challenging throughout all of this, and they've been quite significantly impacted. So we're doing the very best we can to support them in as many ways as we can really, whether that's providing alternative services and also trying to work with our colleagues to sort of get those services up and running and functioning as well as we can.
Thank you, Chris. If I can piggyback off that, if the chair would allow, it's obviously very, very positive what's been noted. Thank you. Just on that, is there like a priority list, for example? Is there kind of awareness of who needs any respite care or who's coming to burnout? You know, how is this observed, you know, by the local authority, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so we basically, you know, would be assessing people individually and their carers and kind of looking at kind of what are the risks around that. So we would be working with them to prioritise, you know, which situations are most at risk of breaking down, in effect. And you know, we've got examples where, you know, there has been carer breakdown, and for example, we've because the risk was too great to move people into a residential home, we've put 24-hour care into that situation in the person's own home to keep everyone safe.
That's great. Thank you, Chris.
Chair, could I just come in on that, please? Just to remind members of the committee, it's Carers Week anyway.
I was going to say that,
yeah, which is great. But I think we don't want to underestimate the pressure that's going to be on carers, and don't forget, mind, a lot of the carers we're known. There's a lot of unknown, unnamed carers that don't even ask for it, and now they're the worry to me. And I just think we got to be mindful that some of them are going to break down, and suddenly they're going to come onto the radar we weren't aware of. So yeah. It's a real worry. It's a real worry for me, and I've said this on many occasions. People are living longer. I don't know how many people are going to reach the age of 100. Well, as I've said before, they're not going to be going on mastermind, and they're not going to be running a marathon. They're going to want some support. They're going to want some care. Not everybody wants to go into a residential home now. I understand that. So a lot of it is going to be staying in their own homes with packages of care. And I think we got to be mindful. This is going to cost a lot of money. domiciliary care is a pressure. There's no question about that. We don't pay them enough. Let's be clear about that. And I hope that what the Welsh Government are going to be doing is really ensuring that that's going to be a more professional type of work. And Chris has mentioned to me, and I think she might have mentioned to the committee before, that on domiciliary care, in the form, I think it's 3 months, 40% of the domiciliary care in the private sector. So these are real pressure points, to be honest. And I think we don't really want to underestimate the pressure on carers and on the pressure that's going to be on the local authority of replacing some of these pressure points.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, can I come on the back of the cabinet member, if you don't mind, please? Just so somebody's noted.
Yes.
That's made my brain cells think there. Thank you. Basically, I'm just wondering, because we as councillors are in our wards as local, people that know our communities. Just want to know, is there anything as local councillors that we could be doing to watching out for these unknown, I would say, heroes, basically supporting, these carers? And is there anything with the partnership board that we can be doing for work to be spotting it, like with the police or anything, knowing if they do interact, that they can maybe see whether or not that there is services that they can actually activate.
Yeah.
Even if they don't want to take it, we know who they are.
Yeah.
Disagree with that at all.
Yeah. Just for awareness, we do have a carers newsletter, and we also we have a lot of carers on our on a database who get the newsletter and get that information, because some people don't necessarily want any more involvement than that. They just want that information, and that's completely fine. So if anybody knows of anybody who'd like to join our network, and it's a range, isn't it? Some people just want information. Some people want, some sort of much more support. And some people, some carers need a huge amount of a kind of support package. So, but whatever level people feel comfortable with, that's fine. So if anybody identifies anybody who'd just like to be in our network, then please let us know.
Councillor Forsey.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, do we know what percentage of carers have had their jabs? And are we tracking, measuring that at all?
Well, the carers were in group 2. And as we know, I haven't got the figures for Newport, but I think the health board figures, because the health board collate that information, not the local councils. So I think, for those groups, we're sort of on about 93% of people have been vaccinated. And as Councillor Cochrane referred to earlier, we were physically collating all of the names for those groups of people and submitting them to the health board. So I've got reasonable confidence that all of the people on the list will have taken up the vaccines that we know of. Obviously, there may be people that we don't know of, but the level of take-up has been very encouraging.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, let's move forward. Page 27. 28. Anybody else on 28? You've only got your hand up again. Sorry.
No, that was my question.
That's okay. Thanks, Yvonne. Okay, page 29. Anybody on page 29? Okay, I have a question. I mean, not a question, I suppose, but an observation to make. The implementation of the new Liberties Protected safeguards. Obviously, we know it's been delayed due to COVID. It replaces the Declaration of Liberty under the Mental Capacity Act. I'm just wondering, as this is vitally important for people for members to understand whether or not a briefing could be arranged via Teams in advance of the implementation of the Act in 2022, just so that we're slightly ahead of the curve and we understand fully what the Act is all about.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I'll take that as an action.
It's already been suggested, actually. I had a meeting with Mary, who is sort of responsible for safeguarding, and she's trying to work out. I think we're going to be possibly, maybe we said about November, that when we got some of the facts and figures, that's what we'll be doing.
Excellent. We're in safe hands there. Thank you for that. We move on then. Page 29, which we've done. Page 30.
Chair, I don't know. I put my hand up. Have you got that?
I'm sorry. Yes, go on. I've got you now. Yeah,
it's just a general point. I mean, Councillor Cochrane and the department have issued a book, a glossary, if you like, of service contacts, and it's from my point of view, it's highly recommended all councillors should have a copy. This reference has been made if you identify someone in your ward in need, so to speak, after the pandemic, because of the pandemic, etc. All the council contact numbers are in that book, and I would suggest if you haven't got a copy, you get a copy. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to comment on that, Chris? Anybody?
No, I mean, absolutely. If people haven't cited on it, we can arrange for it to be distributed.
Well, maybe how many people of the committee have got that?
Can I just come in?
Please do.
The booklet is online,
Okay.
but if anybody wanted a hard copy, they just had to request it.
Okay.
This is the second one we've put out, so obviously if you can go online, but if you want to do a copy, you can get a hard copy if that's what you want.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Chair, on that point, my book at the minute, I've lent it out several times in the war, and I know it's online and all the rest of it, but when constituents approach you, especially on urgent matters, which they usually are by the time they approach you, this book is invaluable in my opinion, and a hard copy is very...
it possible for the members of the committee to receive a hard copy, Paul?
I can say yes, but obviously we'll have to go back. But there are hard copies, but obviously we'd have to get it published, I assume. I don't know.
Okay, I'll leave that with you.
Leave that with me and I'll come back to you.
Right, happy to do that.
Right.
Happy to do that. Thank you, John, for that. Okay, 14. Okay, we go page 14. Page 30. Okay. And we're on page 32. And I believe we've come to anybody got any other observations before we move on? Anybody? Okay. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Paul, for that. It was a very well written report, easy to understand, easy to gauge, and it shows that the department has been working extremely well during the last 18 months, and we hope to see the areas that need improving this time next year show great signs of improvement, and I'm sure they will.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We now move on to the children's and young people. So we've got Sally Ann Jenkins and the Cabinet Member, Councillor Paul Cochrane, again this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, and good morning to all. Obviously conscious you've listened to a lot from Chris already, so I don't want to try to bore you and realise we've got a whole report to go through, so I'll just give you just a couple of words before we start. As with adults, and as you will of course all be aware, the past 20 months have been considerably challenging for all of us, and maintaining services and ensuring that safeguarding is in place for vulnerable children and families has been our priority throughout this period. I think it's fair to say that throughout Children's Services we have operated all the way through. We have had staff continuing to work as they have done in adults and indeed in other areas of the council, in essence doing the job that they always do. There's not been a change in that for us. I think some of the ways that we've had to do that have shifted, so that in some areas we've obviously had to use IT and use digital options, but in essence we've continued to visit all the way through and to spend concrete face-to-face time with families and children. You'll see in the papers that the Children's Services budget, you can see from the outturn, is that we came in at overspend, and although there was a significant diminution in that over the course of the year, and some of the reasons why the forecasting changed in the year Chris has already touched on, which was in essence to do with changes in money that was coming into us from Welsh Government. There were significant extra costs in Children's Services, not in the same way as there were in adults, obviously, but in Children's Services, managing a workforce where we at periods of time did have people who were not in work for various reasons, either they had COVID or they'd been in contact with COVID. But the biggest single cost for us, as always, is in terms of placements. We were already operating in a world in which there were considerable challenges in placements. And the pandemic certainly hasn't assisted in any way in easing the challenges in that world. So whilst we offered extensive additional support to foster carers and our children's home and our children's homes, children who were placed in homes outside of Newport, it still was an area of considerable challenge. At times we had to close down completely our children's home so the staff moved in. So the staff needed to move in for periods when we were looking to have to self-isolate for whole periods. But it's also that the pressure that there was on children and families throughout were replicated in foster care and residential care. So offering additional support and trying to work that through. I did put in my introduction that for some families, and particularly in foster care, that long period of quiet quality time without demands was for some advantageous, but for others it really wasn't. So placements financially continue to be a considerable challenge to us, as they did in terms of just the reality of how do you manage all the negotiation around placements whilst you're also having to put in place the measures that were associated with the pandemic. Just a couple of other things just to touch on is that what you'll see from the data from Children's Services is that the Child Protection Register figures have risen during this period, and in many ways we would expect them to. You will all be aware that the challenges and pressures that there are on families have been substantial throughout. And I think just quite simply looking at for families just to cope has been hard. And whilst we have continued to put in place substantial amounts of family support and indeed additional family support at various points, I think just the rises that we've seen in domestic abuse, increases that we've seen in substance misuse inevitably reverberate for children. We've also seen a worrying increase in some particular aspects in safeguarding which are unusual. I'd highlight one of those to you now. There is a particular area of work that we have in Children's Services around fabricated illness. So this is where a parent creates an illness for a child in order to seek attention. Most of us within our careers will maybe see in a year one of these cases. In the last 3 months, we've had 3 of those, and they are significant, and they are associated with mental ill health in parents. So what we're seeing is a fallout for children from the whole period of the last year. From February onwards, what we've seen, and this has continued into this year as well as the end part of last year, is a sharp rise in the number of referrals to Children's Services for the reasons that I've just outlined, and also echoing, for example, induced illness, the complexity. So what we're seeing is a complexity in some of what's coming through our front door, which is unusual. We always in Newport have an interesting area of work, given our demographic, given the diversity of the population we work with, but the acuity of that over the last 4 or 5 months is stark. I think one of the things that I would say is that this isn't all about, oh my goodness, you know, and I listen to myself saying all of that and I think, gosh, there's a degree of doom and gloom in there. But despite everything, I think one of the really interesting things in children's services throughout this period has been a determination to continue to embrace positive new developments and better ways of providing services for children and families. We are a very research friendly local authority, so we look to new developments elsewhere and in the universities for how we might grow. And just to give you some of the examples of those, we've seen some huge successes with our service Baby and Me. So Baby and Me was set up specifically to help families who are at risk of losing their children as newborns. And what we've seen over the past 18 months is a real success in the number of babies who we've safely been able to get home, who previously would have been removed and in all likelihood would have been placed for adoption. So some real success for Baby and Me. We've seen the introduction of a rapid response service at our front door, and this is very much about how do we put in some really quick and intensive work with families to avoid them becoming enmeshed in children's services. And again, we've got some early glimmers of seeing some real efficacy in terms of that rapid response service. So that's about going in and working with a family all over a weekend, very intensively to try and address issues, particularly when working with adolescents. Again, with adolescents, we've successfully developed a child exploitation toolkit, which is now being rolled out across the whole of Gwent and indeed in all likelihood will be adopted across Wales, and that's a real credit to the staff who've been part of that work. It's a comprehensive piece of work to really work safely with children at risk of all forms of exploitation. We are continuing to increase and develop our services for unaccompanied asylum seeking children. Members will probably be aware that there's been some particular concerns from Kent Authority over the past week about the increasing numbers of children that are arriving on boats. And in Newport, we are in partnership looking to how we develop better services to meet the needs of that group of children. We completed Rosedale, and Rosedale, one of our new children's homes, opened in March. Beautiful children's home. Children have settled really well, and that development is progressing beautifully as a new facility for our children. And the building work started on Windmill Farm, so we have some growth in those areas. We also, against all the odds, saw an increase in the number of foster carers that we were able to recruit. Every year foster carers retire or their lives change and things come along. I mean, I think perhaps many people this year have thought about what their priorities are, and what we've actually seen is some real success from a real drive in terms of recruiting of foster carers. And that's really pleasing because it's meant we've been able to significantly reduce the number of children placed with independent fostering agencies. At the start of the year, we had 72 children placed with independent fostering agencies. At the end of the year, we had 58. And in terms of children being able to remain safely in Newport, that is really encouraging. We've seen an expansion of the safeguarding hub, so we've seen some real growth in terms of working with partner agencies, and particularly we've significantly increased the police presence within the safeguarding hub. Before the pandemic, we had 1 officer with us. We now regularly have 5 officers who are based with us, and that really does increase that joint working, particularly when we're looking at new referrals, and it improves the way that we're able to respond quickly and effectively to families and protect children. I think the last thing I just wanted to say quickly was to touch on moving forward, and I've no doubt you may ask and raise some points in relation to this. I think that staff have coped very well, and there's been a really strong degree of resilience. As Chris touched upon for children as well, we don't rely on agency staff. We have generally a good and solid, a fantastic staff group. I do think staff are tired, and I think we have to recognise that and really look after them as we go into the summer and then whatever the autumn may bring. I think some aspects of our work will continue to be remote. I think we've actually seen some real benefits, not so much from direct work with families, but for example, work in the family court. We know that going forward, work in the family court will almost certainly continue to be on a hybrid footing. So we will have some real person hearings, we will have some remote hearings, and we will have some hybrids. And I think that's to be welcomed, because I do think that saves considerable time for all involved. And if we can make that work for families, that is probably a better way to administer family justice. And similarly, child protection conferences, we will shortly be piloting a hybrid model with the support of the police. We've had an introduction of particular screens and technology. So we will have the family, so the parent, children if appropriate, social worker and the chair of the conference in the Civic Centre, but all the other professional bodies will be on screen. For the first time ever, we've had 100% choracy at child protection conferences from health professionals, and doing it remotely makes that possible for them. So a real welcome for us in being able to use the technology to do that hybrid to provide a better service. So very difficult year, right, for everybody, but some real positives in terms of what we've been able to continue to do and to develop. And hopefully that means that we are well placed in terms of the challenges which undoubtedly are ahead of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. And on, there's something going on here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay. Do we have any questions so far, please, from any member? Stephen Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sally. Always good to hear, obviously, about children's services doing so well under, such weird circumstances. My question is basically related to budget, first of all.
Yeah.
On the report pack on page 35. We've seen what I would deem as a natural going up because of COVID response, but then we kind of level off and we're kind of better than we were prior to that. So I'm just wanting to know what kind of things has been changed or differed to bring the budget down a bit more compared to where we were, please.
I mean, the single biggest factor was that we had additional investment from Welsh Government. So we had late in the year a quite substantial grant in from Welsh Government for children's services to address some of the issues in COVID, which we were able then to use in that way. So that's the biggest single issue that made the difference for us going through the year, was that additional investment.
And to piggyback, if Chair will allow, so will we see similar things happen in the next financial year, and also because of the changes with obviously the new care homes that are now open, things like that, to bring down these costs? Thank you.
I mean, placements, as I've said already, is our biggest single challenge. So obviously reducing the number of children we have with independent fostering agencies and in external children's homes, that does assist. Certainly reducing the number of children we have with independent fostering agencies is a big factor in our budget. And similarly, residential care, as you're well aware, is a big issue. Not that the savings there are huge, but nonetheless they are there. I think the other thing that's interesting is that despite all of this, the numbers of children actually in our care have begun to drop a little. And I think that is a response to some of the work that we've done about reunification of families, about revoking orders. If that continues, we will see a reduction in some areas of our budget. I suppose this is an area I would want to be very, very cautious about. I don't want to say to you, yes, we're going to be able to continue that. I suppose, as I've already touched on, what we are seeing are some real challenges through the front door in terms of what's coming at us. What we try continually to do is to ensure that children can safely remain at home. And that does ensure that that placement budget, we can bring that down. Am I confident that we'll be able to do that this year? I would want to be very cautious given what we're seeing. I mean, again, we can't predict at this stage what would happen in terms of grant funding from Welsh Government. I mean, we obviously every year we do have some form of grant input, and we would anticipate that happening. But at the moment, we don't know that, I'm afraid, Councillor Marshall.
Can I just come in there, Chair, as well, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, Paul, I can hear you. Please come in.
It's just I think what Sally was saying certainly about the foster care, and I think that's a good news story, to be perfectly honest. And I think it did help by increasing the funding for foster carers. But obviously they're not just doing it for money. But then we don't want people to lose out on it. But that's certainly a great move. And I think you know, we do a lot of work with them. And when I spoke to the foster carers, I go to their meetings, and they were saying the support they have from the social services in Newport is first class. And I think, you know, that tells the story there. That's why I think we're getting a lot more foster carers coming forward. With the residential homes, I think Sally did a presentation down with all the other members across Wales, and they were all coming up to me after Sally left and saying, well, how do you do it? You know, because they all want to know how we have got more residential homes than anywhere else in Wales now at the moment. And I think it's not just the savings we're having, it's the way that we're responding to the children's needs. It's, you know, it's you know, when they're going in the independent sector, you know, it's not the same as our homes, and our homes are a home in all sense of the word. You know, you know, there's no locked doors. You know, there's no sort of, when am I going to have my support sessions? You know, 11-year-olds shouldn't be talking like that. You know, if they want to go and get a biscuit or an orange from the kitchen, they just do it. Lots of our children now in the homes are going to school, which they didn't before. So all these are really good things, and I think, you know, we got to expand on that if we can. And I think what Sally has said, you know, I can only support. It's been a wonderful sort of year in that respect. Obviously, COVID has made an impact. There's no question about that. And as Sally has said, the staff are tired because, you know, it's a lot of pressure. And coming back to what Steve was saying about the finance, I can't see us having the same finance, because there was grants coming from everywhere, to be perfectly honest, from Welsh Government this year, and I can't see us getting that funding. Now, what I will say though is that, because I sit on the Regional Partnership Board at the moment, and we have a hell of a lot of money there, to be perfectly honest. We have done extremely well in Newport with the Regional Partnership Board, and that's allowed us a lot of funding as well. We won't know what that's going to be like next year, but obviously, you know, we'll keep battering away there and trying to get every penny out of it if we can. But the Regional Partnership Board has been our salvation as well this year as well. It hasn't just been the grants from Welsh Government over the COVID. The Regional Partnership Board has helped us tremendously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. We have Yvonne Forsey next. Councillor Forsey.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Sally. I think you're to be congratulated on moving to hybrid meetings, which I guess is the optimum of getting that in place so quickly. I think that is, you know, a real bonus, a real advantage, and you know, well done for that. I just wanted to ask about the progress on Windmill Farm and when you expect that to be open. And the other one was Cambridge House. Is that closed now? Yeah.
So Cambridge House is closed. So Cambridge House, the closure went ahead and closed in the middle of May. The discussions for what happens now with Cambridge House are ongoing, but it is now closed as a children's home, and its registration with Care Inspectorate Wales has come to an end, so that's over. And I think there is some sadness there, because whilst it was the right decision to close Cambridge House, obviously they have cared for many children over many years, so it's been an interesting time. With Windmill Farm, build is progressing well. We anticipate being able to open in December. Now, obviously, the vagaries of building work, the pandemic, Brexit, and the weather could all jeopardise that. But that is what we are currently on schedule for, is an open in December, hopefully.
If that's excellent. If it's at all possible that we could have a visit just before opening, having seen it in its unrestored condition, I think some of us would be very pleased to you know, to see it. It would be a joy if that's possible.
I'm sure we'll be able to arrange that, and I'll make a note of that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. One question, I got three questions. One was on Windmill Farm, when it was due to open. It was on time. Obviously, Yvonne Forsey said that. Comment on the news today about children in care, Sally. it seems to have escalated according to Welsh Government, yet ours haven't. Are you envisaging more once increase over the next financial year?
It's interesting what's being reported today. I mean, it's I think it was on S4C last night, wasn't it? And then BBC Wales have picked it up today. And I'm very aware that there's been a great deal of Twitter traffic about it over the past week or so, which is interesting. I think what's happened is that what's led to the coverage today and yesterday is that there has been some research done out of Cardiff University. I mean, if I'm honest, I think that this isn't news. I mean, the figures in Wales have been significantly higher than the English figures for going back 7, 8, 9 years. So yeah. I think it's not a particularly new story. And I'm also conscious that actually the numbers across Wales, not just for us, there was a very slight reduction. So I think it's quite interesting that it's been picked up this week in the way that it has. Possibly it's linked to the research that Cardiff University have just done. I think it is really challenging, this area, and we obviously we've talked about it before here, haven't we, about what is a right number for the children who should be in care, because what you want is you want children to be safely cared for first and foremost with their families, which is our #1 objective in our service plan every year. But if they can't be, then you want to offer them the best possible alternative care, which is our second objective. And I think identifying a right number is an incredibly challenging and I think somewhat misleading approach. I think what's happened with the BBC Wales and S4C coverage over the past 24 hours is very much focused on the rate per 10,000 and comparing England and Wales. Yeah, I do think that it is really quite unfair to compare all of Wales with all of England when you look at our demographic. We know that deprivation is a very key driver in the numbers of looked after children. And obviously we will all be aware that Wales has a higher rate of deprivation than England on overall. If you compare Wales with, for example, the northwest of England, rather than comparing with the whole of England, we are much more similar. If you compare Wales with Surrey, we obviously will be in a very different position for reasons associated with deprivation. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we have differences within Wales. So the rate per 10,000 within Wales, Newport actually sits slightly below the average. We have done for some considerable time. We've never been above the average for Wales. We've always been in the lower half of the averages. And yet some of our neighbouring authorities, particularly Torfaen, sadly, is one of the highest. It's the highest in England and Wales, and the difference is really difficult to work that out. As I've said already, for Newport during the past year, our numbers have very slightly come down, and it is slightly, and I think they've come down for very particular reasons. I think they've come down because of our policy of really supporting older children to go home and to be reunified safely with parents and building support in. And the other factor that I think we're beginning to see is the impact of Baby and Me, which I referred to earlier. Oh. I saw our adoption figures yesterday, and our adoption figures, the number of children we have waiting for adoption currently is the lowest it's been in my entire time as head of service in the last 9 years. And I think that is very much attributable to Baby and Me. We're getting a really good service for mums who would otherwise risk losing their children. So I think it's interesting what's going on nationally and the media interest and the Twitter and all the rest of it. And I see some of it and I just think, oh no, here we go again. But for us in Newport, I do feel probably more confident than I do about almost anything else that we will certainly be able to keep the number as is, if not bring it down a little further. Having said that, we could have 5 children in this afternoon and that all goes out the window. But I suppose that I think what we have got here is a range of provision which is really helping us to make sure the right children come into care and that we are able to get children home safely when appropriate. And I know that, my service managers are really on the ball about looking for ways that we can best do that. How can we support foster carers to become special guardianship carers? How do we better support family members? How do we provide support very early in pregnancy? all of those things we are working really hard towards. So and it's a long answer, but I think that's probably about where we are.
It's just the fact that obviously BBC and S4C are not comparing apples with apples.
No, absolutely.
Thanks for that clarification, because I didn't know that. The other thing is, you mentioned the police. You have full attendance with it. I'm rather surprised with that, because obviously we don't get them at council because they can't log on for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, I think operationally we have an increasingly positive relationship with the police and with colleagues in the police. I mean, this is obviously particularly the public protection unit, so those officers arranged in involved in safeguarding. But we also do have good police attendance in terms of exploitation. It's not without its challenges. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, Councillor Watkins, the police, you know, they seem to move seats like most people, I don't know what. But nonetheless, we do have some very good working relationships, and definitely having them here. I'm in the Civic Centre today, and I've had a walk and hello, and they're all there, and I'm like, oh hello, or whatever. It definitely makes a difference in terms of being able to have really quick, positive discussions with them when we're involved working with them.
Lovely. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we're going to move on to page 38 now. Which is the beginning of the service plan updates, as they say. So anything on page 38? I'm trying to watch the screen, as everybody knows. All I have is darkness in front of me. So it's I'm trying to do two things here, which is impossible for males, as you know. Multitasking. So 38, 39, 40, any comments on 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. Okay, nothing on 47. The last 3 pages, then they go 15, 16. Stephen Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I couldn't quite keep up with your speed there. Apologies.
I apologise. I didn't realise I was.
No worries. It's mainly about the question about the number of young people on the protection register. I was trying to track which page that was, and just wanted to kind of figure out, is that what something that we've really pre-planned from the news, as you said, with Cardiff University Studies, or is it something that we're kind of alert to but may not change dependent?
I mean, the stuff coming out this week that we've just talked about with Councillor Watkins is very much to do with looked after children as opposed to children on the Child Protection Register. So whilst we've seen a holding, if not a slight reduction in the numbers of looked after children, we have seen an increase in the number of children on the Child Protection Register. I mean, what we know historically is that there is a correlation between the number of children on your register and then an increase later on in your numbers of looked after children, which is a worry. Yeah. But what we've seen is we've seen an increase in the register, and then we've seen it start to come back down again. So what we're hoping is that increase in registration will level out without seeing corresponding increase in numbers becoming looked after. I think the other thing, and again, I've touched on this a little already, is that I think one of the reasons why that number of children being looked after is coming down is because of us getting children home. So it's not just about us bringing children in. It's also about how we then, perhaps a year, 2 years later, particularly for older children, how we then get them home. And we've got much better at that in the last 2 years than we used to be. I think we were much more stuck, probably until 2 or 3 years ago, about once children were in, they were in until adulthood. They were either adopted or they were in till adulthood. We've become much better about proactively working with birth families to recognise that their lives change. So whilst they might not be able to care for children when they're 5 or 6, some 6 or 7 years later, their lives have changed, the children's needs are different, and they're able to change. So we've got better at that. So yes, that registration figure rising is a worry. It's not as big a worry as it was 6 months ago, I suppose, is where I would be at the moment on it.
That's great, Sally. Thank you. I think that was my main concern as well. It's kind of looking at, you know, when we're talking about like COVID, the COVID cases and hospital cases, it's kind of seeing what that next stage is and the worry of the delayed effect of that. So thank you for that. And that sounds good. That is obviously decreasing. If the chair will be happy for me to add another question in, I don't know quite where it fits in or two. So just basically engaging with young people and mental health. Sally, it's a big issue, as we're aware, especially with the current situation. Just want to hear what the situation is with the you know, the services involved, if they had delays, you know, anything like that, just to give us guidance, please.
I mean, obviously engaging across that whole spectrum for children with emotional wellbeing and mental health challenges, from children who are really very unwell to children who are experiencing sadness, I suppose, and trying to work out everything in between, is really challenging. We have benefited in Gwent from quite a lot of work around the models that we have for children's mental health. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Is it better? Yes, it is. So there's a sort of balance. We have a very well established pathway in for primary mental health for children, and that's primarily children who are referred in through the GPs. But what we now operate in Gwent is a process where that GP referral goes into a multi-agency panel. So rather than just going into health, it's looking at actually, might there be something here for parenting? Is this something for young carers? Is there a different sort of approach that's needed? And that is generally a very welcome step in terms of better being able to meet those kind of early signs that possibly children are struggling in terms of emotional well-being. In relation to specialist CAMs, we've seen quite a lot of development in terms of looking at how we work with them. There are quite often frictions between children's social care and specialist CAMs, and this would be no surprise in having this conversation. I do think what we've got here now are some much better working relationships. I have in my phone the numbers for the 2 lead psychiatrists, so when it gets really sticky, and similarly they can ring me, so we've got those kind of routes in to be able to have those conversations when things aren't working. There is a wait for some services now, which there wasn't before, and that is in part because of an increase in the referrals that there have been to their provision. But I was in a meeting yesterday, which was picking up, looking at how do we deal with that, and how do we deal with that across agencies, but also how do we involve schools in that, and how do we ensure that additional support is being put in place for children for that in the areas in which they are, so be that school or youth group. I do think that probably it is one of the areas that we are most concerned about, is that what happens now for children and young people whose lives have, as for all of us, but very different if you're 13 than if you're 58. Let's face it, you know, the disruption is very different. And I think the impact on children and young people of the last 15 to 18 months is only just beginning to emerge. So I think we're aware of that. I think having to work cross-agency to address it is really important. And I think that shared understanding that we need to work together is definitely there. It doesn't mean we don't sometimes fight, we do. But I think the very fact that we're able to have those difficult conversations puts us in a very different place from where we've been in the past.
That's great, Sally. And if the chair will allow me to add in, I do have 1 or 2 points on there. Just when you said about education, obviously that's another main concern. And how did the young people in our care, as a local authority, you know, how are they getting through the education side, like with laptops and the contact and things like that? How are they doing?
I mean, in terms of children who have been in our care through this period, we have been absolutely clear that they would have the provision that you would have for your own children. These are our children. So children in our care, we are their corporate parent. Some here are or have sat on corporate parenting forum. So we have made sure that they have had whatever they needed, be that being able to access the hubs when only hubs were open as vulnerable children, be that full access to IT. So we used various pots of money we have to address that, including the St David's Fund, which is a particular grant we have from Welsh Government. We paid for internet access in some cases. We ensured that our younger children had proper equipment. And then for older children, we did for some provide a smartphone where it was the only way that we could do it. So we've done that throughout. We were lucky enough to get a number of donations throughout this period. I mentioned One Admiral was one of them, where we had, I'm in the office next to me, I know that there is still some iPads waiting to go out. So we've been lucky in being able to access that. So I think in terms of looked after children, I'm absolutely confident that we've been able to meet their needs. And I think, again, as we've touched on, what we tried really hard to do was to support foster carers and residential workers to care in the best way possible. And again, we're conscious that many of our children will need catch up, because obviously for some of them that they because of previous trauma, they're not in the best place for education to start with. So again, we're committed to looking at that. I think the group of children that perhaps where we had to work harder were those children not in our care, but kind of on the edge. So children we work with, children on the register. But again, what we tried to do was to make sure that they had the resources that they had in order to be able to access education. So yes, we've been very conscious of needing to do that throughout this period.
Thank you very much, Sally. That's very reassuring. Chair, I do have two further questions, if you allow me to note in.
Yes, carry on, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, massive, well, I'm going to say congratulations on the work being done on the foster care and adoption. I've publicly seen it on the, social media. It's been a very loud, thing on there, and had a lot of people talking, including among friends, which was very interesting to see. And as you said, people are literally looking at their priorities moving forward, and looking, is that, the right direction for them? So well done on that aspect. It does lead me on to the question of how are we, now against our competitors, because obviously I would say competitors that way, because these private companies, including some of the charities, do take people out of the area, things like that there, and it's not always the right fit. So just want to know where we kind of stand there, and against them, and what we're doing to try and combat their tactics, if you will.
Councillor Cochrane touched on that right at the beginning of the pandemic. We'd already taken through Cabinet and Council an increase in our fees for foster carers, and it was very timely because it was in April 2020, and it's fluke that it happened like that. So it meant that in terms of with other local authorities, that what we pay our foster carers is on a par and is on a footing with our other local authorities. But it was a really welcome turn of events that it happened at that point in last year. I think, again, what Councillor Cochrane mentioned, I think what foster carers who foster for us often feel is that they're part of Newport, is that they are fostering Newport children for Newport, and we really use that message in a way that I think is right, is that this is about Newport children being fostered by Newport people in Newport, and that's a really strong message for us. I think, as you're aware, is that ensuring children are here means that we have a continuity of education, we have a continuity of family for them. In terms of access to mental health support, we're much more likely to be able to sustain that if children remain locally. And I think foster carers understand that, and they're with that message. I think a lot of the work that's been done in terms of supporting foster carers this year, we do have great social workers in our fostering team and fostering link workers. We have a really solid programme for our foster carers for training, for support, for out of hours support. And I think we also, for example, over Fostering Fortnight, making sure that you go that extra mile. This year, all our foster families had a peace lily, a plant delivered. They always have that communication from us. We've communicated with them very solidly all the way through. And I think they're proud to foster for us. We've had foster carers who've fostered for us for very many years. And we do find that word of mouth is really good, because we find that then they understand about support and what that means. Councillor Cochrane referred to meetings, so things like Foster Care Forum is really well attended. They like that. It's not always comfortable. Why aren't you doing that? Well, but that's right. That's the way that it should be. I think in terms of our other local authorities, we're very similar, and we're on a par, and we do a lot of work together. So certainly across Gwent, I mean, a lot of what happened in Fostering Fortnight was driven by comms for the whole area, which is really welcome because it meant that we were able to consistently get those messages out on Twitter and on Facebook, which was great, but also in Newport Matters, and also in terms of some coverage in the Argus, which was great. And we had the tower lit up orange on the relevant night, etc., etc. But we're also part of Foster Wales, which is the 22 local authorities working together, and that is being driven forward. And we will be presenting that at partnerships actually during the course of this year. So that's a kind of description of how the 22 local authorities are coming together to really think about how we foster within the public sector. I think in terms of the private agencies, and you're right, I mean, obviously there are third sector voluntary organisations who have charitable status. I think what we would consistently stress is support, and we would stress that framework of these are our children, so that we're able to provide that first party strength of connectivity for those children when they're in our care. And I think that is the fundamental difference between us and the private sector. And the other thing is that what many people, when they look and they explore what happens with particularly the private sector, less so charitable, put that slightly differently, is that obviously these are international companies with millions and millions of pounds, businesses that move and trade. And I think for foster carers, they often don't want that. They want to be part of a local authority. So, and it is something about continuing to reinforce that message is very, very important. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, we'll allow it one final one for me in two parts. So again, it links partially to the foster care side of things and adoption. So, you know, some good companies are really, really good in the time that they give off and things like that, and they make people aware that they have the time and commitment if they wish to go down that route. The first question is, what is our partnerships like with the private sector in order to try and encourage their staff to, you know their rights and things like that, to encourage them to foster or to adopt, is one part. But then the other part is partnerships again, and just what is our overall partnerships like with others, especially you know, as we're going through COVID? Have they strengthened, as you quite rightly said, challenged as we move forward?
I mean, in terms of adoption, I mean, adoption leave is a statutory right. I mean, it's in the same way as maternity and paternity leave are statutory provisions. So in terms of all employers, that's a given. That's not. I think in terms of fostering, it's a little bit different. And I think there is something about when we're assessing people to become foster carers, that's always part of the discussion about how does this fit with your life and the way that you work. I mean, what we usually see is that for people who want to foster particularly young children, that it's a household, and possibly it's two people and one of them, it doesn't work or is going to work part-time. But we also see families where people do work full-time. And I mean, one of the things that we did in Fostering Fortnight was about myth busting, is that, you know, anybody can foster. There are no sort of exclusions in terms of work or age or household. So it was about trying to really emphasize that there is a place in fostering for everyone, regardless of what their other lifestyle commitments might be or their work commitments. So I think we continue to do that. We don't explicitly work with private businesses in order to encourage them to release people to do fostering. That's not a route that we've explored. Maybe that should be, but it's not something we've done to date. In terms of partnership working, in relation to adoption, we are part of the regional consortium. That's the way that our adoption is. So that's very much partnership between the 5 local authorities with third sector representation and health involvement in that. And in terms of fostering and partnership, obviously we have partnership with foster carers. That's absolutely key. And then we do have other partnerships, some with business in terms of support for foster carers. And then more widely in terms of partnership and COVID, I would say that and we've touched on the police and those relationships. Obviously, within the local authority, we have colleagues in RIH and education who we work with, and then we've also touched on health. I think that We do work very much in partnership. You can't work in children's services without it, and it's absolutely key to what we do. So we're very conscious of it, and we're very conscious that very often we make assumptions and our expectations are different, and the same for others. I think Chris mentioned that over this period, in a way, it's reinforced to all of us, and some of the meetings that we've been in have, if anything, strengthened that, and I think that would be the same for children's as well.
And can I ask, as part of that, with a piggyback of that question, if you don't mind, just about the youth voice for those young people in care and that, and how have we listened to them during COVID, please? Thank you.
Okay, so we've done a lot of work directly with children in our care, and we've done a lot of work mentioned in the report about artwork with children and expressing how they feel and what they want. So that's been one element. We've done that through some of our social work staff. We've done quite a lot of work in terms of linked to fostering fortnight to do with young people's case studies and their experiences. And we had, as part of that, we had a young person who's been in our care for quite some time, who spoken very eloquently about her experience of foster care. I noticed yesterday that young lady who's now featuring in the Naira and Bevan adverts for Get Yourself Vaccinated is one of ours. So that was really, she's over 18, so really pleasing to see her promoting that for all young people, that vaccination is the way forward, which was great. And I think the other thing that we've done is during this period, we've expanded the membership of corporate parenting. So we now have a foster carer, a residential worker and a young person on our foster parent corporate parent forum. And our meeting next week will be the first meeting where our young person hopefully is able to attend. So it's about trying to find different ways to do that. We also undertook a piece of work during COVID where this will be the third time we've done this, where we asked Bernardo's and the staff in the partnership to undertake a consultation for us. And so they did a piece of work where they spoke with staff, they spoke with children, young people and with parents about their experience of our services. And they then produced that as a report for us to consider what we could learn. And in relation to their experience of services from COVID, that was very enlightening in terms of, we make assumptions about teenagers that social media is all fine and they want to communicate on a phone. And actually that wasn't true at all. They wanted to see people. So we were really quite clear about using some of that. We did a really strong encouragement for all our children to take part in the Children's Commissioner's 2 surveys, which the Children's Commissioner undertook. And we've also had children and young people involved in some work with the Family Justice Observatory, funded by Nuffield, looking at how we work with exploitation. So a whole range of different things which getting that child's voice all the way through, basically. So right way through from littlies all the way through to our older teenagers. Thank you.
That's great, Sally. Thank you for that answer, and a big thank you from me to all the staff as well, and to yourself. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I shall endeavour to slow up in future for you and for everyone else, and including myself. Okay, so page 15. If we look down there, please stop me. As I said, I can't see anybody. Page 16, page 17, and I believe the final page is page 18. Okay, thank you. Right, we've come to the end of the presentation and the reports. Can I thank the Cabinet member for presenting and for being and for interacting with us. Can I also thank Chris Humphreys and Sally Ann Jenkins as well. Can I thank the members as well for the good level of questioning that was that came out today.
Chair,
yes, please, by all means.
Yeah, can I just make an observation, please, and thank you for those comments. If you go back to page 42, it's about the process, really. It's about the service plans update. If you can just look at page 42, and this is where I have a real issue with some of these. If you go into page 42, if you don't mind going back to it, where we got, there's the red on the contingency option. And now, you know, we're in the red zone there, but that's been delayed due to COVID, right? So we can't do anything about it, and yet we're in the red. If you look at number 4, we're waiting for Welsh Government to give us some guidance. So we've already done it, as Sally have just said. You know, we're revising our membership of the corporate parenting. So we're doing all that. Yet if someone looked at that now, we would be in the red zone there. And I think this is where I have a worry about some of these processes of the service plans, that we've got to go into red zone, and it's out of our hands. It was just a point I'd like to mention to the committee, that, you know, when you see the red, it's not always our fault.
I'm sure, and thank you for raising that, Paul. We were aware of that. Maybe we should have congratulated you on not being responsible for placing us into the red. But yes, that came out. If it had been otherwise, not delayed due to COVID and not delayed due to, I don't know, Welsh Government or the effects of COVID, etc., we would have picked up on that. But it's a good point. It's a good point you raise, and I thank you for raising that point. There we go, and thank you for all your input this morning as well, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move forward now, and yes, you can either stay and listen, or you could go off and do whatever you need. But we're going to move forward now to item 6, our draft annual forward work programme.
Oh, sorry, Chair, before we go on to the annual forward work programme, would it be okay if we just took the conclusion of the reports that we've received today, just so we can take comments or recommendations that yourself and the committee would like us to send back to the heads of service and the cabinet member?
Yes, there's okay, before I say anything, does any member of the committee have anything to say? Don't put your hand up, just jump in at this stage.
Chair, I think with myself, if you don't mind, I think it's prudent that the officers all round from adult services and young people services have worked, you know, I'm going to say damn hard, you know, during COVID, and it shows throughout the report that there is, you know, a lot of good work that's basically done. And I think Newport should be proud of themselves, you know, for the work that's been undertaken, and the officers and staff have every right to be proud of that work, and ensuring that the services are provided of good quality throughout one of the most difficult times in living memory. So I think, you know, on my side, and I'm sure colleagues would agree, I think, you know, to recognise that definitely, and very well written reports, definitely, Chair.
Yes, no problem. Anyone else?
I'll second that, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
I'll third it, Chair.
You can third it. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Yeah, it gets me every time, you know. Third it indeed. There we go. And yes, as chair, I would like to add my. I'm going to forfeit. How's that? I'm going to add my my congratulations and I suppose my support to the staff, because as members it's been difficult, as individuals it's been difficult, but going to work and doing what they've done and supporting those who are vulnerable and in need, and balancing up their own work-life balance as well. As I said at the beginning, I'll say it now, they are the real heroes, the real heroes of Newport, and there are many of them. Can I just also note that they have promised to roll out a briefing via Teams for the new implementation of the Liberty Protected, Safeguarded, and we welcome and thank them for that, please. Is anything else? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, Neil, do you want to go take us through the work programme, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So, committee, this is the draft annual work board work programme for the 2021 to 22. On page 59 on the agenda, you notice our next meeting is on the Tuesday, the 22nd of June. We'll have our second part of the end of year reviews. So we'll have education coming for this, the Chief Education Officer and the Cabinet Member for Education. Then Tuesday, the 21st of September, Sally will be back with the service manager and team manager to discuss the children's residential care, providing updates from the service area on the recent developments of the children's residential care. Next, in November, we got 2 meetings again. This would be for the mid-year reviews for the service plans. It'd be in the same format again, so we'll have children and adult social services coming on the 2nd of November. On the 15th of November, we'll have education coming in. In January the 11th, we'll have the draft budget proposals. So again, we'll have for that all the heads of service within the people remit come in to give their proposals. And then on Tuesday, the 22nd of March, we have adult residential care. So Chris will be coming to that meeting to give an update on the service area and the recent developments of adults residential care. As always, the forward work programme is member led, so if there is anything from service area reviews that the committee would like further information on or would like to deep delve in further, we can add. It's always there for flexibility for members as well, so if the committee would like to discuss anything on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody got to are we content with the work programme first off? And do we have anything we want to add to it?
No.
No, I guess we're all content with the work programme. If there's no objection, we will carry on with that. You have the dates at the back of this agenda as well. Please note there is a time change on one. Oh no, there isn't on this, but on the other one there was a time change.
15th of November, Chair.
Yeah. But on
apologies, that was a typo. Sorry, Chair. It should always be on Tuesdays.
Yes, absolutely. There we go. Okay, well,
Chair,
we were awake and obvious. Yes, please.
can I add in? I think it's probably prudent for Tuesday, 2nd of November, like a brief update like we had before about the youth justice, please.
Yes.
I think it would naturally fit in with that one on the 2nd of November.
Okay. Do you know that, Neil?
That's been noted. Thanks very much, Councillor.
Okay, with nothing else, I'm going to call this to an end. But before I quickly do, can we make sure that we're next meeting on the 22nd, that our IT is up and running properly, Neil? Can you try and see what's going on? I mean, I know it's not your fault, but it's difficult to conduct a meeting without sight of anybody.
Of course, totally agree with that, Chair. Yeah, we're liaising with SRS as we speak now, so hopefully they resolve this issue with Microsoft, and hopefully we won't have these problems again. But that's noted. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's only a few of us that have been affected by it, and I know that yourself, John, as well, wasn't it? Have been affected, and I have, and so it seems to be. I don't know what it is.
It's creeping down Chapstow Road, I would suggest, Chairman.
Oh well.
Chair, I had a message from SRS to restart my computer. Now I've restarted it. I'm in the same boat as you. No pictures at all.
Oh yeah. I mean, yes. Well, we need that in the hands of the experts, because we I don't know. There's nothing we can do, is there?
No,
nothing we can do, except
SRS.
you know. There we are. Okay then, well, thank you for attending this morning. Thank you for all your contributions. And the next time we meet will be the 22nd of June. So we'll call the meeting to a close now, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.